Natalie Grayson never thought her life would turn into a quiet hell. Once, 10 years ago, she was different. A cheerful English literature student who quoted Pushkin and Dostoevsky, dreamed of happiness, and believed that love could change a person for the better. Curtis Grayson seemed like a strong, confident man who knew what he wanted from life. He was 5 years older, already starting his business, spoke beautiful words about family and children. Natalie fell in love quickly and recklessly. The first 2 years of marriage were tolerable. Curtis worked a lot, came home late, but didn't yell. Natalie got a job at a school, taught English and literature to 5th graders, enjoyed her students. But then something changed. Business took off, money flowed like a river, and with them came drinking, hangers-on friends, and her husband's contempt for his wife. First, Curtis simply asked her to quit, said it was awkward when the wife of a successful entrepreneur worked for pennies at a school. Natalie obeyed. She was used to trusting her husband. Then he forbade her to meet with friends, explaining that they were a bad influence on her. She agreed to this too. And when her husband started yelling at her in front of guests, humiliating her, calling her an idiot and useless, she simply fell silent. She learned not to object, not to argue, not to cry in front of people. Natalie remembered how 6 months ago Curtis threw a tantrum over oversalted soup, screamed so loud the neighbors banged on the wall, and she stood by the stove, silently wiping tears with a kitchen towel. Then he left, slamming the door, returned 3 days later drunk, threw money on the table and said, "Buy yourself something, don't walk around like a beggar." She took that money and hid it in the back drawer of the dresser, didn't spend a penny. Another month later, Curtis brought home a group of friends in the middle of the night. Natalie woke up to the crash and drunken laughter. Came out in her robe, asked them to be quieter. Her husband looked at her with such contempt that she physically felt the cold in her chest. "Go to bed, cow," he said. "Don't embarrass yourself in front of people." His buddies snickered. Natalie turned around and left. Didn't come out again. Several months had passed since then. Curtis drank more and more often. Friends came every Friday, sometimes on weekdays. Natalie turned into a shadow, cooked, cleaned, kept silent, lived in her own apartment like a servant who wasn't paid or thanked. Today was Friday, end of October, a warm autumn evening when the air didn't yet feel cold, but already smelled of fallen leaves. Natalie was making dinner when Curtis burst into the apartment with 2 buddies. One of them, Garrett Sullivan, an eternally drunk joker who giggled at every crude remark from her husband. The second, Nathan Barton, Curtis's business partner. A tall, fit man about 40 with hard features and a cold gaze. Natalie was a little afraid of him, though he had never been rude to her. He just emanated some kind of unapproachable strength. Natalie had seen Nathan only a few times over the past years. Usually he appeared at business meetings that Curtis sometimes held at home. Nathan was always restrained, taciturn, didn't drink too much. Curtis complained that his partner was too boring and proper, but at the same time admitted that it was Barton who was pulling their joint business through. "Without him I would have gone broke long ago," her husband said when he was in a good mood. "Natalie, set the table," Curtis barked, throwing his jacket on the couch. "We're celebrating a deal today." Natalie silently nodded and began taking snacks out of the refrigerator. Her hands trembled. She knew the evening would end badly. It always did. The men sat down at the kitchen table. Curtis pulled out a bottle of whiskey. Garrett laughed at some vulgar joke. Nathan sat silently, occasionally sipping from his glass. Natalie placed plates with cold cuts, salad, and hot food in front of them. Curtis didn't even glance at her. "Get out of here," he tossed out, not raising his eyes. "Men are talking." She went to the living room, sat on the couch, and tried to read a book. But the words blurred before her eyes. From the kitchen came loud laughter, the clinking of glasses, music from someone's phone. The clock showed 9 in the evening. Natalie knew it would go on until midnight or longer. She took a volume of Chekhov from the shelf, opened it randomly. the darling. She read and didn't understand a word. Letters merged into black spots. Thoughts were confused. Natalie remembered how she once taught literature herself, explained to children what subtext, psychology, and character were. Now she herself had become the heroine of some dark story from which there was no way out. At 10:30, she couldn't stand it. The music was blaring so loud, the walls vibrated. The neighbors were surely already angry. Natalie got up, approached the kitchen, and quietly said, "Curtis, it's already late. Maybe you could turn it down." Her husband turned to her, eyes bloodshot, face red from alcohol. "What did you say?" He slowly rose from the table. The neighbors might complain." Natalie's voice trembled. "Shut your mouth and go to your room before you catch it from me." Curtis roared so loudly that she flinched. Garrett giggled. Nathan sat motionless. His face remained impenetrable, but his gaze flicked toward Natalie for a moment. She didn't manage to make out what was in that look, sympathy or indifference. Natalie turned around and quickly walked to the bedroom, closed the door, sat on the bed and cried quietly. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound, just sat and breathed, trying to calm down. Time dragged painfully. Natalie heard the party continuing in the kitchen. The music would die down, then rise again. The men shouted, laughed, cursed. Garrett was telling something about another drinking session at a fishing trip. Curtis guffawed. Nathan occasionally inserted short remarks. Then relative silence came. Apparently, they turned off the music. Natalie was already beginning to hope that everyone would leave soon. She looked at the clock, 11:45. Usually at this time guests left. And then she heard Curtis's voice, drunk, loose, loud. "Let's play one more time. The winner gets my wife." Natalie froze. She thought she had misheard. This couldn't be true. Even Curtis, even drunk, couldn't say such a thing. Garrett guffawed. "Are you serious?" But Nathan's voice cut through the silence, sober, hard, absolutely serious. "If I win, I'll take your wife forever, and you'll divorce her, and I'll sever all business ties with you." Natalie covered her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming. This was impossible. This was delirium. But Curtis laughed, loudly, contentedly. "Deal! Fair game, guys! We have a witness! Garrett!" Garrett drunkenly shouted something, clapped his hands. The sound of cards on the table, the scraping of chairs. They were playing for her, like she was a thing, like a dog. Natalie sat on the bed and couldn't move. Her head was empty. Her hands went numb. Her breathing was ragged. She heard every sound from the kitchen, every word, every chuckle. Nathan said something briefly. Curtis snapped back. Garrett commented on every move, encouraging first one, then the other. "Oh, you've got a weak card, Curtis," Garrett giggled. "Shut up, I know what I'm doing," her husband growled. Nathan was silent. Only the rustling of cards and the quiet tapping of his fingers on the table could be heard. Probably 10 minutes passed, maybe 15. Natalie wasn't keeping track of time. She just sat and listened as three men decided her fate at the table over vodka and cold snacks. And then came the slap of a palm on the table and Nathan's triumphant voice, "I won." Silence. Natalie heard Curtis slowly exhale. Garrett laughed. Then her husband slapped the table and said with drunken bravado, "Fair game, bro. A deal is worth more than money." Natalie couldn't believe her ears. He agreed. He just agreed. Gave her away. Sold her. Lost her at cards like some kind of bet. Footsteps approached the bedroom. Natalie jumped up from the bed, backed toward the wall. Her heart was pounding wildly in her chest. There was a knock on the door, not rudely, but almost delicately. "Natalie." Nathan's voice was calm but firm. "Come out, please. I won't let you stay here." She stood, unable to move. Nathan knocked again. "Don't be afraid. I won't hurt you. But you must leave here. Right now." Natalie slowly approached the door, turned the handle, opened it. Nathan stood on the threshold, tall, sober, with an impenetrable face. He extended his hand, not rudely, but almost carefully. "Come with me." She looked at him, then at her hand, and suddenly realized there was no choice. Here, in this apartment, she was no longer a person. She was a thing that could be put at stake. And there, with this strange, cold man, at least some chance. Natalie took his hand. Nathan firmly squeezed her fingers and led her to the exit. In the kitchen sat Curtis, red, drunk, pleased with himself. Garrett giggled in the corner, swaying on his chair. Nathan stopped in the doorway and said in an icy tone, "From today, I'm severing all business ties with you, Curtis. I don't need a scoundrel in business or in life." Curtis raised his head, tried to say something, but Nathan had already turned around and led Natalie to the door. She simply walked behind this man who had won her at cards and was now taking her from home. They went outside. The warm autumn evening enveloped them in silence. Lanterns burned with soft yellow light. Somewhere in the distance a dog barked. Nathan opened the door of his car, a black SUV, expensive, well-maintained. He seated Natalie in the front seat, sat behind the wheel himself, started the engine. She sat with her hands clasped on her knees, looking out the window. Didn't cry, didn't speak, just looked. The car started moving. Nathan drove confidently, calmly, not speeding. Natalie saw familiar houses, shops, bus stops flashing by the window. They were driving through the whole city, and with every minute she moved further away from the hell she had lived in for the past years. "I'm not taking you like a thing," Nathan said, not looking at her. "I didn't win another man's wife. I pulled a person out of a cage. Tomorrow I'll give you my lawyer. You'll file for divorce, and you'll get everything you're entitled to by law." Natalie turned her head and looked at him. Nathan was driving calmly, confidently. His face remained hard, but something like sympathy flashed in his eyes. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" "Because what he did to you is despicable," Nathan answered. "And I don't work or associate with scoundrels. Never." He fell silent, then added, "I saw how he treated you. Not just today. I came to him several times over the past 6 months on business. Every time he yelled at you, humiliated you, you were silent, endured. I understood that sooner or later I would have to break off relations with him. But today, he crossed a line that cannot be crossed. Betting your wife, this isn't just despicable, this is vile." Natalie closed her eyes. For the first time in many years, she didn't feel fear, only emptiness, and a strange, almost weightless relief. The car stopped near a high-rise building downtown. Nathan got out, opened Natalie's door, helped her out. They went up in the elevator to the 12th floor. Nathan opened the apartment door, let her go first. A spacious, bright apartment with large windows, minimalist furniture, no unnecessary details. Clean, neat, almost sterile. "This is the guest room," Nathan pointed to the door on the left. "The bed is clean, towels in the closet. We'll talk in the morning. Good night." He turned and went to his room. Natalie remained standing in the middle of the hallway, then slowly entered the guest room, closed the door, sat on the bed, and only then burst into tears, quietly, convulsively, burying her face in the pillow. Natalie woke up to bright light hitting her eyes through unfamiliar curtains. For several seconds she lay motionless, trying to understand where she was. Then memory returned, sharply, painfully, like a blow to the ribs. Last night. Cards. Her husband's voice. "The winner gets my wife." Nathan Barton, his cold hand, the car, this apartment. She sat up in bed, looked around. The guest room was simple and neat. A wide bed, a closet, a desk by the window, an armchair in the corner. No paintings, no decorations, only functionality. Natalie looked at the clock, 8:30 in the morning. Saturday. Usually on Saturday she got up early, made breakfast for her husband, cleaned the apartment. Now everything had changed. She got up, approached the window. The city was waking up below. Cars, people, ordinary life. And her life had split into before and after. Yesterday she was a married woman, albeit unhappy, but had at least some status. Today she was… who? A runaway? A woman who was lost at cards and taken away by the winner? A light knock on the door made her flinch. "Natalie, are you awake?" Nathan's voice was quiet, almost delicate. "Breakfast is in the kitchen when you're ready." She answered quietly, "Thank you. I'll be right out." She washed her face with cold water from the tap in the bathroom attached to the guest room. Looked at her reflection in the mirror. Pale face, eyes swollen from tears, disheveled hair. She was wearing the same clothes as yesterday, home pants and a light sweater. She had no other things. Everything remained there, in that apartment, at Curtis's. Natalie went to the kitchen. Nathan was standing at the stove, flipping an omelet in a pan. Seeing her, he nodded toward the table. "Sit down. Coffee or tea?" "Tea, please." She sat at the table. Nathan placed a cup of hot tea in front of her, a plate with omelet, toast, butter. He sat opposite with a cup of coffee. For a while they ate in silence. Natalie chewed slowly, with difficulty. She had no appetite at all. "You need documents," Nathan said, sipping coffee. "Passport, marriage certificate, everything else. I can take you there today, you'll pick up your things. Or if you don't want to see him, my man will go. He'll bring everything." Natalie raised her eyes to him. "I don't want to go back there. Never." "Then I'll send Gerald. He's my driver, a reliable man. Make a list of what you need. He'll pick it up." She nodded. Nathan took out his phone, typed something, put the device on the table. "I'll call my lawyer now. Marcus Warren, my personal attorney. He handles divorces too. Good specialist, tough. Your husband will try to crush you, intimidate you, leave you with nothing. Marcus won't allow that." I can't pay for a lawyer's services," Natalie said quietly. "I have no money. Curtis controlled everything. Marcus works for me. You pay nothing." Nathan spoke calmly, as if it were obvious. "This is my thanks for agreeing to leave yesterday without a scandal." Natalie looked at him attentively. Nathan was dressed in home clothes, gray sweatpants, black t-shirt. His hair was slightly tousled, light stubble on his cheeks. He looked younger than yesterday, and not so cold, but his eyes remained wary. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "You don't know me. I'm a stranger to you." Nathan set down his cup, looked at her directly. "Because I can't watch despicable behavior and do nothing. Your husband is a scoundrel. He humiliated you for years, I saw it. And yesterday he crossed the line beyond which vileness begins. Betting your wife, this isn't just a drunken stunt. This is an indicator of who he really is. And I don't want to deal with such a person. Not in business, not in life." He fell silent, then added, "I grew up in a family where my father beat my mother. Every evening, if he was drunk. I saw how she endured, kept silent, was afraid to leave. Then she died of a stroke when I was 15. Doctors said, from constant stress. I swore to myself then, if I ever see a man abusing a woman, I'll intervene. Always." Natalie listened without interrupting. Nathan spoke evenly, without emotion, but she felt that behind these words was pain that he carefully hid. "Yesterday I deliberately proposed that bet," he continued. "I wanted to test how far he was ready to go, and he went. Agreed to give you away, like a thing. After that I couldn't leave you there. Do you understand?" Natalie nodded. Her throat tightened with tears, but she held back. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what else to say." "You don't need to say anything." Nathan got up, took the empty plates. "Rest today. Tomorrow Marcus will come. You'll discuss the divorce with him. And for now, make a list of things you need to get from Curtis." Natalie spent the rest of the day in the guest room, making a list of necessary things. In the evening, Nathan said, "Tomorrow I'll contact Curtis through Marcus. The lawyer will officially request your personal belongings and documents. By law, he's obliged to return them. If he refuses, we'll file a report with the police about unlawful retention of your documents." The next day, Marcus called Curtis and firmly demanded the return of Natalie's passport, her personal belongings, phone, and documents. Curtis first refused, yelled into the phone, but the lawyer warned that retention of documents is an administrative offense punishable by a fine. 3 hours later, Curtis himself brought 2 large bags to Marcus Warren's office, threw them at the secretary with the words, "Give this to that. Let her take her junk." Marcus personally checked the contents: Natalie's passport, phone, marriage certificate, other documents, clothes, shoes, cosmetics, several books, everything she had listed. In the evening, Gerald, Nathan's driver, a sturdy man about 50, brought the bags to Natalie. She silently sorted through the things, hung them in the closet. It was strange to see her clothes in a stranger's home, but at the same time, it meant that she had finally left her past life. In the evening, Nathan suggested they have dinner together. They ate in silence, occasionally exchanging short phrases. He didn't ask unnecessary questions, didn't pry into her soul. He was just there, calm, reliable, like a wall. On Sunday morning, Natalie woke to the sound of running water. Nathan was taking a shower. She got up, dressed, went to the kitchen, decided to make breakfast herself, at least to thank him for his help, found eggs, milk, cheese in the refrigerator, made an omelet, brewed coffee. Nathan came out 10 minutes later, fresh, in jeans and a shirt. Seeing the set table, he was slightly surprised. "You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to," Natalie answered. They had breakfast. Nathan said that today in the afternoon, Marcus Warren, the lawyer, would come to see her. She needed to be ready to answer questions, tell the whole truth about her marriage to Curtis. "Marcus will ask about unpleasant things," Nathan warned, "about humiliations, insults, control. You'll have to remember what you want to forget, but it's necessary for the case. The more evidence, the better." Natalie nodded. She understood that a difficult path lay ahead. Marcus Warren arrived exactly at 3 in the afternoon, a tall, thin man about 45, in a strict suit. He shook Natalie's hand, sat opposite her in the living room, took out a voice recorder. "Natalie, I'll ask questions. Answer honestly. Don't be shy about details. Everything you say will remain between us and will be used only for your defense. Agreed?" "Yes," she nodded. Marcus turned on the recorder and began. He asked about everything. When the humiliation began, how often Curtis insulted her, whether he forbade her to work, meet with friends, manage money. Natalie answered, trying not to cry. She remembered episodes she tried to forget. "Was there physical abuse?" Marcus asked. "No, he never hit me, only insulted with words." "Threats? Intimidation?" "Yes. He said that if I left, I'd be left with nothing, that he'd prove I was mentally unstable, that no one would believe me." Marcus nodded. "Typical abuser tactics. We'll take that into account. Now about that last evening at home. Tell me in detail what happened," Natalie told. About the drinking, the insult, how she locked herself in the bedroom, about Curtis's phrase about the bet, about how Nathan won and took her away. Marcus listened without interrupting. "Are there witnesses?" he clarified. "Garrett Sullivan. He was there." "Good. We'll summon him to court if necessary. Now about the divorce. Do you want to divorce Curtis Grayson?" "Yes, as soon as possible." "Do you have children together?" "No." "Jointly acquired property?" 2 apartments, one 3-bedroom where we lived. The second 2-bedroom downtown, bought 3 years ago. Also a car in Curtis's name, and money in accounts, but I don't know how much is there." Marcus wrote down, By law, all jointly acquired property is divided in half. You have a right to half. Curtis will resist, that's for sure. He'll try to prove that you didn't contribute to the family budget since you didn't work. But we'll prove that he himself forbade you to work, which is a form of control and abuse. We have every chance of winning. Natalie listened and could hardly believe this was happening to her. Just 2 days ago, she was a voiceless shadow in her own home. And now she's sitting opposite a lawyer discussing divorce, division of property, her freedom. How long will the divorce take? She asked. Minimum a month if Curtis doesn't drag it out. But he will. Most likely the process will stretch for 2 or 3 months. Maybe longer. You need to be patient. Marcus finished the conversation after 2 hours, collected documents, turned off the recorder, stood up. I'll file the petition in court tomorrow. We'll start the process. Natalie, you need to be strong. Curtis will try to break you, with calls, threats, blackmail. Don't give in. All contacts only through me. If he shows up here or stalks you, immediately call the police and me. Clear? Clear. She nodded. Marcus left. Natalie remained sitting on the couch, stunned. Nathan entered the living room, sat next to her. How did it go? He asked. Hard, but necessary. Marcus is a good specialist. He'll pull you out of this swamp. Natalie turned to him. Nathan, I don't know how to thank you. You're doing so much for me, and I— No need for thanks, he interrupted. I'm doing what I think is right. You just live here, recover. The rest will follow. She fell silent. Nathan got up, headed for the exit, but turned around. Natalie, you're stronger than you think. You lived 8 years in hell and didn't break. That's worth a lot. Don't forget that. He left, leaving her alone with her thoughts. In the evening, Natalie went to bed early, lay in the dark, looked at the ceiling, thought about what awaited her ahead. Divorce, court, the fight for her right to live. Scary. But somewhere deep inside, hope glimmered. Small, fragile, but alive. She fell asleep, thinking that for the first time in long years, she was sleeping peacefully, without fear that the door would open now and her drunk husband would burst in with screams and insults. Here, in a stranger's home, she was safe. And it was strange, almost incredible. The next morning, on Monday, Natalie woke to the smell of coffee. Nathan was already getting ready for work, suit, tie, briefcase in hand. Good morning, he said, pouring coffee into a travel mug. I'm leaving now. I'll be back in the evening. If you need anything, call. My number is on the refrigerator on a magnet. Okay, thank you. Nathan left. Natalie remained alone in the large apartment. A strange feeling, freedom and loneliness at the same time. She walked through the rooms, examining the furnishings. Everything was strict, functional. No unnecessary things, no coziness. A bachelor's apartment of a man who lives for work. At noon, Marcus called. Said he had filed for divorce. Curtis would be served a summons within a week. The process would begin. Prepare for him to start calling you, the lawyer warned. Don't answer. Let him call me. Natalie put down the phone and felt her heart tighten with anxiety. It had begun. Now there was no turning back. Curtis was served the summons on Wednesday, 3 days after the petition was filed. Marcus called Natalie that same evening and warned, Your husband received the documents. He's furious. Already called me, yelled, threatened, demanded a meeting with you. I, of course, refused. Be prepared for him to try to reach you through acquaintances or show up somewhere nearby. Hold on. Natalie felt everything go cold inside. She knew Curtis. Knew he wouldn't just give up. He was used to controlling, possessing, pressuring. Divorce for him wasn't just losing a wife. It was losing power. On Thursday evening, when Natalie was alone in the apartment, the doorbell rang. She froze. Nathan had gone on business to another city, would return only tomorrow. She approached the door, looked through the peephole. Curtis stood on the landing. Her husband looked angry, unshaven, enraged. He clearly hadn't slept for several nights. Seeing that someone was looking at him through the peephole, he spoke loudly. "Natalie, I know you're there. Open up. We need to talk." She stepped back from the door, her heart pounding. Curtis rang again, then pounded with his fist. "Open up," I said. "Stop hiding. This is all nonsense, understand? I was drunk, wasn't thinking. Let's forget everything, come back home." Natalie stood with her back against the wall. Her hands were shaking. She took out her phone, dialed Marcus Warren. He answered immediately. "Natalie, what happened?" "Curtis is here, at the door, knocking, yelling. Don't open under any circumstances. I'll call the police now. Where's Nathan?" "On a business trip." "Okay, hold on. Police will be there in 10 minutes. Curtis continued knocking, his voice getting angrier. "Have you completely lost your mind? You think Barton will protect you? He'll use you and throw you away, you fool. And I'm your lawful husband. Open the door immediately." Natalie stood silently. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't make a sound. Just waited. 12 minutes later, police appeared in the building. Natalie heard their voices, then Curtis's voice, first indignant, then frightened. They were taking him away, demanding he calm down. Curtis yelled that this was his wife, that he had a right. The police didn't listen. When everything quieted down, Natalie opened the door. One of the policemen stood on the landing, a young man about 30. "Your husband?" he asked. "Yes. We're getting divorced. He has no right to appear here." "Understood. We made a report. If it happens again, call immediately." "Thank you." The policeman left. Natalie closed the door, locked all the locks, pressed her forehead against the cold metal, breathed deeply, trying to calm down. The phone rang. "Marcus." "Everything okay?" "Yes. They took him away." "Good. Natalie, you did great. You did the right thing not opening the door." Nathan returned Friday evening. Learning what happened, he frowned. "Why didn't you call me?" "Didn't want to disturb you. Marcus handled everything." "Natalie, if something like this happens again, call me first. Always. Understood?" She nodded. Nathan looked at her attentively, then said more gently, "You're managing. That's good. But don't keep everything inside. If it's hard, talk." On Monday, the court hearings began. Marcus took Natalie to court. They sat in the corridor, waiting to be called. Curtis appeared 10 minutes later, with another lawyer, an elderly man in an expensive suit. Seeing Natalie, Curtis stepped toward her, but Marcus stood between them. "My client doesn't wish to contact you." Curtis stopped, sneered maliciously. "You've completely gone crazy, Natalie? Forgot who fed you for 8 years?" Natalie looked at him silently. Before she would have lowered her eyes, shrunk, been afraid. But now something inside her had changed. She saw before her not a formidable husband, but a pathetic drunk trying to regain power with shouts. "I haven't forgotten anything, Curtis," she said quietly but firmly. "I remember everything, every insult, every humiliation, and how you lost me at cards." Curtis's face contorted. "That was a joke, you fool. Don't you understand jokes?" "A joke?" Natalie stood up, looked him straight in the eyes. "You gave me to another man, like a thing. That's not a joke. That's vile." Curtis's lawyer tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Grayson, let's go. Not worth talking to them." Curtis threw one more malicious glance at Natalie and walked away. Marcus said quietly, "You did great. Didn't break." The hearing began half an hour later. The judge heard both sides. Curtis's lawyer claimed the divorce was unfounded, that the spouses could reconcile, that Natalie was acting under the influence of Nathan Barton, who was manipulating her. Marcus countered harshly. Presented evidence: neighbors' testimonies about constant scandals, recordings of conversations where Curtis insults his wife, mentioned that Natalie didn't work at his prohibition, and most importantly, testimony from Garrett Sullivan, who was summoned to court. Garrett came confused, frightened, told how Curtis proposed to gamble his wife at cards, how Nathan won, how it all happened, tried to smooth it over, say it was drunken fun, but the judge stopped him. Witness, answer clearly. Did Grayson really bet his wife? Well, yes. Garrett lowered his eyes. But he didn't mean it seriously. The court will decide what he meant. You're free. Curtis sat red with anger. His lawyer whispered something in his ear, trying to calm him, but it was too late. The judge heard all the arguments and scheduled the next hearing in 2 weeks. In early December, the court decided to dissolve the marriage. Natalie got the 2-bedroom apartment downtown and half the funds in the joint account, $380,000. Marcus called Natalie and read the decision. She listened and couldn't believe it. An apartment, money, freedom. This was reality. Congratulations, Natalie, Marcus said. You're free. She ended the conversation and sat on the couch. Just sat, looking out the window. Nathan entered the room a minute later. Marcus told me, you're finally free from him. Natalie turned to him, and tears poured out. But these weren't tears of grief. This was relief, liberation, joy. Nathan approached, carefully put his arm around her shoulders. That's it. Now you can start living anew. She cried, burying her face in his shoulder, and he just held her, not saying a word. A week later, Natalie received the keys to the apartment. 2-bedroom, bright, downtown. Empty, without furniture, but hers. She stood in the middle of the living room and couldn't believe this was her home. Hers, and no one else's. Nathan helped with the move. Hired movers who brought furniture, bought with the money Natalie received after the divorce. A simple couch, bed, table, closet, everything most necessary. She didn't want anything extra, only what was needed for life. When everything was arranged, Nathan said, "You did it. Now you have your own home, your own money, your own life. What's next?" Natalie looked at him. "Work. I want to work. I sat at home too long." "What did you work as before?" "An English teacher, but I don't want to go to school. Want to try something new." Nathan thought, "Try writing. You have an education in literature. Many publications now are looking for content writers." Natalie nodded. It was interesting. She always loved to write. Back in university, her articles were published in the student newspaper. The next day, she responded to several vacancies. A week later, she was invited to an interview at the local newspaper, City Chronicle, a small publication coming out twice a week. The editor, Vincent Leonard, a man about 60, looked at her resume, asked several questions about literature, asked her to write a trial text on a given topic. Natalie wrote in half an hour, an article about city parks in autumn. Vincent read it, nodded. "Not bad. Lively, vivid. We'll take you. Salary is small, $35,000 a year, but the work is interesting. Good team." "I agree." Natalie smiled for the first time in many months. She started working in early January, wrote articles about city life, interviewed local residents, covered events. The work wasn't too complex, but brought pleasure. Natalie felt she was needed again, that someone valued her work. Colleagues accepted her warmly, especially Linda Isaacs, the newspaper's proofreader, a woman about 50, kind and talkative. She immediately sensed that Natalie had gone through something difficult and didn't ask unnecessary questions, just helped, supported, invited her to drink tea during lunch break. "You're coming alive, Natalie," Linda said once when they were sitting in the editorial kitchen. "When you came a month ago, you were like a shadow, and now your eyes are shining." Natalie smiled. "I've just finally started living." Life was falling into place. Work, her own apartment, peace. Curtis no longer appeared. Marcus reported that her ex-husband had left the city, gone to New York. Business without Nathan went downhill. He had to sell assets. Nathan sometimes called, asked how things were. Natalie told him about work, about the apartment. He listened, sometimes gave advice. They met occasionally. He helped fix a faucet in the kitchen, helped choose a refrigerator. Didn't impose, didn't pressure, just was there when needed. February turned to March. Natalie felt something changing inside. She stopped being afraid of loud sounds, stopped flinching at men's voices, learned to sleep peacefully, learned to smile for no reason. One evening, Nathan invited her to dinner at a cafe. They sat by the window, talked about everything and nothing. He told about his business, she, about the newspaper. It was easy, calm. "Natalie," he said suddenly, "you've changed, become stronger." "Because you helped me," she answered. "If not for you, I'd still be living in that cage." Nathan shook his head. "I only opened the door. You came out yourself." They fell silent. Something new, unfamiliar hung between them. Not gratitude, not friendship. Something more. Spring came unexpectedly early. Already at the end of March, the city drowned in greenery. The first flowers bloomed in parks, the air filled with warm wind and the smell of young grass. Natalie was walking home from work and suddenly caught herself smiling for no reason. Just like that. Because the sun was shining, birds were chirping, life was going on. 3 months had passed since the divorce. 3 months of new life, her own, real, without fear and humiliation. Natalie worked at the newspaper, wrote articles, communicated with people. The salary was small, but enough to live on. The apartment was gradually being lived in. Curtains appeared on the windows, a rug in the living room, a bookshelf with favorite volumes of classics. Linda Isaacs had become a real friend to her. They often drank tea after work, talked about life. Linda told about her adult children, about grandchildren. Natalie told about her plans, wanted to take cooking courses, maybe get a cat. "You've become completely different," Linda said, carefully studying Natalie. "When you came to the editorial office, you were all tense, scared, and now you've blossomed. It's joyful." Natalie smiled gratefully. She herself felt the changes. Every morning she woke up without heaviness in her chest, without fear of a new day. Learned to rejoice in little things, a cup of aromatic coffee, a good book, an evening walk along the waterfront. Nathan called regularly, once a week, asked how things were, whether help was needed. Sometimes they met, had dinner at a cafe, walked in the park, talked. Natalie noticed that with each meeting it became easier and more pleasant for her with him. Nathan was calm, reliable, smart. He didn't try to pressure, didn't pry into her soul, didn't demand anything in return. Just was there. One day in mid-April, Nathan called late in the evening. Natalie was already lying in bed with a book. "Natalie, sorry it's so late. I have a request for you." "Tell me." "Tomorrow evening I have a business dinner. Important negotiations with potential partners. They'll all be with companions. Would you agree to keep me company?" Natalie was confused for a moment. I'm not sure I can handle it. I don't know how to communicate with businessmen." "You don't need anything special. Just be there, support the conversation if they ask. I'd be grateful." She agreed. The next day after work, she went to the shopping center, bought a simple but elegant dress, dark burgundy, knee-length with long sleeves, high-heeled shoes, a little makeup. Looked at herself in the mirror and was surprised. She looked good, not luxurious, but dignified. Nathan picked her up in the evening. Seeing her, he held his gaze a second longer than usual. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." Natalie felt her cheeks redden. The restaurant was expensive, with dim lighting and quiet music. At the table waited 2 men about 50, owners of a large logistics company. With them were their elegant wives in expensive outfits. Nathan introduced Natalie simply, "My companion." The men nodded, shook hands. The conversation turned to business, contracts, development plans. Natalie listened, sometimes inserting short remarks when she was asked. One of the partners, Irving, turned out to be quite talkative, asked what she did. Natalie answered that she worked at a newspaper. Irving became interested, started asking about journalism, about how articles are written. The conversation came out easy, pleasant. The evening was successful. The partners agreed to cooperation, shook Nathan's hand, said goodbye. When they were alone, Nathan looked at Natalie gratefully. "You helped me a lot. Thank you." "I did almost nothing," she smiled. "You were there. That's important." He drove her home. At the entrance, Natalie wanted to get out, but Nathan stopped her. "Natalie, may I ask a question?" "Of course." "Are you happy now? I mean, do you feel free?" She thought, then nodded. "Yes. For the first time in many years, I feel that I'm living. Not existing, but truly living. And it's thanks to you." Nathan shook his head. "Not me. You yourself. I just helped open the door." Natalie looked at him attentively. In the lantern light, his face seemed softer, younger. She suddenly realized that she had long stopped seeing him as a stranger. He had become close, important. "Good night, Nathan." "Good night." She got out of the car and walked to the entrance. Turned around, Nathan was still sitting in the car, watching her, waved his hand. She waved back and went into the house. May brought new changes. Vincent Leonard, the editor-in-chief of the newspaper, suggested Natalie run a weekly column. People's stories. Stories about city residents, about their fates, problems, joys. Natalie gladly agreed. The first story she wrote about Linda, about a woman who raised 3 children alone while working as a math teacher, and now helped raise 5 grandchildren. The column came out touching, lively. Readers responded, called the editorial office, wrote letters, thanked. Natalie felt she had found her calling. She knew how to listen to people, see something special in ordinary fates, turn it into words. Work stopped being just earnings. It became meaning. At the end of May happened what Natalie feared, but knew would happen sooner or later. Curtis returned to the city. She learned about it from Marcus. Her ex-husband's business in New York didn't work out. He returned with nothing. Natalie tensed. Marcus warned to be on guard. The meeting happened a week later. Natalie was leaving the editorial office in the evening when she saw a familiar figure by the gate. Curtis. He stood leaning on the fence, smoking. Seeing her, he straightened up. Natalie stopped a few meters from him. Her heart beat faster, but she wasn't afraid. Just looked at this person who had once been her husband and was now a stranger. "Natalie." Curtis's voice was hoarse, tired. "Can we talk?" "We have nothing to talk about," she answered calmly. "Leave before I call the police." "I don't want anything bad." He stepped closer, but Natalie stepped back. "Just want to say, I screwed up. I understand. Forgive me." Too late. Natalie took out her phone. "Leave. Now." Curtis looked at her with a long gaze. In his eyes was something like despair. "You've changed. You used to be afraid of me. And now, you're strong. I see it. Yes, I've changed. Because I no longer live in fear. Leave, Curtis. And don't come back." He stood another moment, then turned and walked away. Natalie watched him until he disappeared around the corner. Nathan learned about it that same evening. Called immediately, his voice worried. "Are you okay?" "Yes." He just stood there, talked, didn't touch me. "Natalie, if he appears again, call me immediately. I'll come." "Okay. Thank you." She hung up and suddenly realized she hadn't been afraid, hadn't broken, just calmly put her ex-husband in his place and continued living. This was victory. Curtis didn't appear again. Marcus found out that he left again, this time to Denver, to distant relatives. Natalie breathed a sigh of relief. This chapter of her life was finally closed. June was warm and sunny. Natalie signed up for cooking courses. Life filled with new impressions, new acquaintances. She felt alive, real. Nathan continued calling. They met more and more often, walked along the waterfront, went to movies, had dinner at cafes. Between them arose closeness, not physical, but emotional. They understood each other from half a word, could be silent together and not feel awkwardness. One evening at the end of June, they were sitting on a bench in the park. Nathan was looking into the distance, then turned to Natalie. "Natalie, I want to say something. I've wanted to for a long time, but didn't know how to start." She looked at him attentively. Nathan was serious, even tense. "I got used to being alone. Lived like that for many years. Work, home, no attachments. I was comfortable. But since you appeared in my life, everything changed. I think about you constantly. Worry when you're not well. Rejoice when everything's good with you. And I realized I don't want to be just a friend. I want to be there. Always." Natalie listened, not looking away. Her heart beat fast. "Nathan, wait, let me finish." He took her hand. "I know what you've been through. Know you need time. I'm not rushing you. Just want you to know I'm here, and if someday you're ready." Natalie felt tears welling in her eyes. Warm, bright tears. She squeezed his hand. "Nathan, I think about you too. Every day. You pulled me out of hell, gave me a chance at a new life. But it's not just gratitude. I feel something more for you. But I'm afraid. Afraid to trust again. To let someone into my life again. I understand. And I'm ready to wait as long as it takes." They sat silently, holding hands, and watched the sunset. Natalie felt something melting inside, something warm and bright spreading in her chest. She wasn't ready to jump into a new relationship right away, but for the first time in a long time, she wanted to try. July brought new changes. Natalie and Nathan started meeting more often, not living together, not rushing, just being a couple. Went on dates, talked for hours, got to know each other anew. Nathan was patient, attentive, never pressured. Natalie learned to trust again, with small steps. Linda at the editorial office immediately noticed the changes. "Your eyes are glowing in a special way. Is there a man?" Natalie smiled. "Yes, the same one who helped me get divorced." "Nathan Barton?" Linda knew the whole story. "He's a good man, Natalie. Hold on to him." "I'm trying." August was happy. They went on weekends out of town, walked in the forest, swam in the lake. Natalie discovered in herself the ability to rejoice in simple things, the smell of pine, warm water, the silence of nature. Nathan talked about his plans for the future, about how he wanted to expand the business, but not forget what's important, the people nearby. One evening when they were sitting by a campfire near the tent, Nathan asked, "Natalie, have you ever thought about children?" She froze. The topic of children was painful. Curtis didn't want children, said she couldn't handle it, that they would interfere with his life. "I thought," she answered quietly. "Once I dreamed of a big family, but then stopped dreaming." "And now?" Natalie looked at the fire, at the sparks flying into the night sky. "Now I'm starting to dream again." Nathan smiled and put his arm around her shoulders. They sat like that for a long time, listening to the crackling fire and the rustling of the forest. September began with an important conversation. Nathan invited Natalie to a restaurant, the same one where they had been at a business dinner in spring. They sat at a table by the window, ordered dinner. Nathan was serious, but not tense. "Natalie, I've been thinking about this for many months, and I want to ask you." He took a small box from his pocket, opened it. Inside lay a simple gold ring with a small diamond. "Will you marry me?" Natalie looked at the ring, then at Nathan. Her heart pounded, her breathing caught. She remembered that evening when he took her away from hell, remembered how he helped her get back on her feet, how he supported, how he waited, remembered that this man never caused her pain, never humiliated, never betrayed. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Nathan. I'll marry you." He put the ring on her finger, kissed her hand. Natalie smiled through tears. This was happiness. Real, honest, hard-won. They scheduled the wedding for the end of October. Natalie didn't want a lavish celebration, and Nathan supported her. They registered at City Hall in a small circle. Linda Isaacs, Marcus Warren, Gerald the driver, several of Nathan's colleagues from business, and a couple of Natalie's friends from the editorial office. Simple, quiet, without unnecessary pomp. Natalie wore a light knee-length dress, simple but elegant. Nathan was in a strict suit. When they exchanged rings and kissed, Linda wiped tears with a handkerchief, and Marcus nodded approvingly. Everything was right, honest, real. After registration, they had a small dinner at a restaurant. No toasts and long speeches, just dinner with close people. Linda came up to Natalie, hugged her tightly. "You deserve this happiness, girl. Cherish it." "I will," Natalie promised. Marcus Warren shook Nathan's hand. "You made the right choice. She's a wonderful woman." "I know." Nathan looked at Natalie warmly. "I saw it from the very beginning." In the evening, they returned to Nathan's apartment. Natalie had rented out her 2-bedroom. They decided they didn't need 2 apartments for now. Money from the rent was set aside for the future. Life together began calmly and measuredly. Nathan left for work in the morning. Natalie went to the editorial office. In the evening, they had dinner together, talked, watched movies. On weekends, they walked around the city, went to nature, cooked together. No scandals, no screaming. Just quiet, kind life of 2 people who valued each other. Natalie learned to live in a new way. Before, she was afraid to express an opinion, afraid to do something wrong so as not to anger her husband. Now she could just be herself. Nathan never criticized her choices, didn't laugh at her ideas, didn't make her feel stupid or worthless. One evening she was making dinner and accidentally oversalted the soup, realized it only when they sat at the table. Natalie froze with a spoon in hand, expecting an angry tirade. But Nathan simply tasted it and said calmly, "A little oversalted. Nothing terrible. We'll dilute it with boiled water. Don't worry." She looked at him in surprise, then felt tears welling up. Nathan became alarmed. "What happened?" "Nothing. Just before I would have been cursed for this. And you?" "Natalie." He took her hand. "It's just soup. It's not a reason for a scandal." She nodded, wiped the tears. This was another small victory over the past. Every day brought such victories. She learned not to be afraid, not to make excuses, not to expect punishment for every little thing. One evening, when they were sitting on the couch drinking tea, Nathan said, "Natalie, I was thinking about children. You said you're starting to dream again. I want a child too, with you." Natalie looked at him, her heart beat faster. "I'm afraid. What if I can't handle it? What if I'm a bad mother?" "You'll manage. You went through hell and didn't break. You're stronger than you think." He took her hand. "And I'll be there. Always." She nodded. The fear remained, but there was also desire. To try, to give life to a new person, to create a family she never had. "Okay," she whispered. "Let's try." Nathan hugged her tightly. Natalie pressed against him, feeling warmth and protection. For the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the future. December brought news. Natalie felt bad in the morning. Nausea appeared. Took a test. 2 stripes. She was pregnant. She told Nathan in the evening when he returned from work. Simply handed him the test, not saying a word. He looked, then raised his eyes to her. In them was delight, joy, something very bright and warm. "Really?" he whispered. "Really." Nathan hugged her tightly, kissed her forehead, cheeks, lips. Natalie felt tears rolling down her face, but these were tears of happiness. "We're going to have a child," Nathan said, not letting her go. "Our child." The pregnancy proceeded calmly. Natalie continued working at the editorial office, then went on maternity leave. Linda organized a small celebration at the editorial office. They gave her a stroller and a bunch of baby things. Vincent Leonard promised that after maternity leave she could always come back. Her place wouldn't be given to anyone. Nathan took the pregnancy seriously, went with Natalie to all doctor's appointments, read books about raising children, set up the nursery, bought a crib, changing table, toys. Painted the walls in gentle peach color, hung a cloud-shaped lamp. Every evening he put his hand on Natalie's belly, talked to the baby. "Hello, little one," he said quietly. "This is Daddy. Mommy and I are waiting for you. We'll love you always, no matter what." Natalie looked at him and couldn't believe this was reality, that she found a person who truly loved her. The ultrasound showed a girl. They chose a name for a long time, went through options. Nathan suggested Clara. Natalie liked it. Simple, classic, beautiful name. Natalie rested a lot, read, walked in the park near the house. Linda came to visit, brought pies, talked about life. Nathan tried to come home from work earlier to spend more time with his wife. Sometimes they sat together and imagined what their daughter would be like. Nathan said she'd be smart, like Mom, and stubborn, like Dad. Natalie laughed and added that the main thing was for her to be happy. "We'll do everything for her to be happy," Nathan promised. "She'll never know what fear in her own home is. We'll never hear screaming and insults. She'll grow up in love." Natalie believed him, because Nathan never made empty promises. One evening when they were lying in bed, Natalie said quietly, "Nathan, you know, I sometimes remember that evening, when you won me at cards, and every time I think, what would have happened if you hadn't taken me away from there?" Nathan turned to her. "I would have pulled you out anyway. Maybe differently, but I would have. I couldn't watch how he treated you. You saved me." "No. You saved yourself. I just opened the door, and you walked through it. You found the strength to file for divorce, defend your rights, start a new life. That's your achievement, not mine." She pressed against him, listening to his heartbeat. This was her home, her family, her happiness. Labor began on time. Natalie woke up in the middle of the night. Nathan called an ambulance, packed a bag, went with her to the hospital. Held her hand while doctors prepared her for delivery. Didn't leave for a minute. Labor lasted 8 hours. Hard, painful, exhausting. But when Natalie heard her daughter's first cry, everything was forgotten. A small warm bundle was placed on her chest. A tiny girl with a red wrinkled face and tightly closed eyes. "Clara," Natalie whispered, kissing her daughter on the forehead. "Our Clara." Nathan stood nearby, looked at both of them, at his wife and daughter. His eyes glistened with tears. He leaned down, kissed Natalie. "Thank you. For our daughter. For giving me a family." Natalie smiled through fatigue and tears. This was the happiest moment of her life. They were discharged from the hospital 5 days later. Nathan came for them with a huge bouquet of flowers. Gerald drove the car carefully, avoiding all potholes. At home, Linda met them. She came to help. The first weeks were difficult. Clara cried at night, demanded feeding every 2 hours. Natalie didn't get enough sleep, was exhausted. But Nathan helped, got up at night, carried his daughter in his arms, sang lullabies to her, changed diapers. He was a patient, caring father. One night Natalie woke up and didn't see Nathan next to her. Got up, went to the nursery. He sat in an armchair with Clara in his arms, quietly humming some lullaby. The girl slept, breathing softly. Nathan rocked her carefully, afraid to wake her. Natalie stopped in the doorway, looked at this picture. Her heart overflowed with love, for her husband, for her daughter, for this life she had suffered for. Summer entered its rites, hot, bright, filled with long evenings and warm nights. The city drowned in greenery, parks were fragrant with lindens, and the air was so fresh it was easy to breathe even on the hottest days. Natalie gradually recovered from childbirth. Her body returned to its former shape, strength increased with each day. She began doing light gymnastics in the morning when Clara was still sleeping. Stretching, a few simple exercises, nothing complicated, but it helped her feel better, more energetic. Clara grew not by days, but by hours. Every week Natalie noticed changes. Her daughter became bigger, her face rounded, her eyes, bright, dark, like her father's, looked at the world more and more consciously. She became calmer, cried less at night, learned to fall asleep to a quiet lullaby, smiled at Mom and Dad, first unconsciously, then more and more deliberately, recognizing familiar faces. Nathan returned from work every evening and first of all took his daughter in his arms. Even if he was tired, even if the day was hard, he went to the nursery, leaned over the crib and said quietly, "Hello, my little one. Daddy's home." Clara joyfully cooed, waved her tiny hands. Nathan carefully took her, pressed her to his chest, kissed her. Then sat in an armchair and talked with her, told about his day, about what he saw on the way home, about plans for the weekend. Clara listened, looking at him seriously, as if understanding every word. Sometimes he played with her, showed bright rattles, moved a soft toy in front of her face, made funny faces. Clara followed the movements, tried to grab the toy with her little hands, sometimes laughed, quietly, ringing, and it was the most beautiful sound in the world. Natalie stood in the nursery doorway and looked at them, at her husband and daughter. Her heart overflowed with tenderness. This was her family, real, strong, built on love and respect. Linda continued to visit them, helped with household chores, taught Natalie the wisdom of motherhood. Life entered a new rhythm. Natalie realized that motherhood was hard, but incredibly happy. One June morning, Natalie woke to silence. Strange, unusual silence. Clara wasn't crying. She got scared, jumped out of bed, ran to the nursery. Her daughter was sleeping in the crib, breathing through her nose. Nathan sat in the armchair nearby. He was also sleeping, apparently got up at night, lulled Clara to sleep, and dozed off himself. Natalie stopped in the doorway, looked at this picture, at her husband and daughter, at the quiet morning, at the sun breaking through the curtains. This was her home, a home where you're not sold, a home where you're loved and valued. Fate led her here, to happiness she had suffered for, to a family she deserved. Nathan woke up in the armchair, saw Natalie. "Good morning." "Good morning. Did you sit with Clara all night?" "She couldn't fall asleep, had to rock her. Then I passed out myself." Natalie came up to him, looked in his eyes. "Nathan, I love you so much. And I love you, more than anything in the world." This was her home, a home where you're simply loved. And that was enough for happiness.